Those eyes disguise our high bright lights decide the fight. Your heart beats fast despite the truth that love is blind. I just wanna feel anything.
Welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast with your host, Matthew M.
Hello and welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast, where we are clean and serene with a filthy mind in between. My name is Matthew M. I am your host and I am an addict in recovery. Welcome to episode 30, everybody. So crazy. We're to episode 30. We're into another month. We're a week deep into September, y'all. Excuse me, 2021, but where did you go? Like, I can't be the only one feeling this, right? Like, I swear, I blinked and it was Christmas, and now I blinked and it's damn near going to be Christmas again. They already, like, pretty much got Christmas trees up in Walmart. Like, already. Fuck are we doing here, y'all? Anyway, I hope everybody had a wonderful week. Hope everybody had a safe, healthy, clean, if you're in the program, Labor Day. And hopefully you're ready for a great episode today, because we're going to be talking about a lot. We're going to be talking about chapter number 7, titled Recovery and Relapse. We're going to be talking about some Marvel. We're going to be, if you're watching the live stream right now, you know we're going to be talking about a little bit of Marvel. We're going to talk about some music, some TV, in my favorite moment of the week. We're going to be answering some more questions in our Ask an Addict segment. And of course, giving them clean time shout outs. So thank you everybody for being here. I love you all. Hopefully my voice is coming through clearly. I had another one of those 11th hour issues where I did a test of my OBS software, and for some reason my microphone was deciding to spaz out. So that wonderful stress of the clock's ticking and we need to get this episode ready to go led to me doing some tests and turning my microphone super down. So hopefully you guys can hear me, and if not, hopefully you can read my lips well. I don't know. Anyway, I digress. Before we go anywhere, we gotta say what's up to and thank you to our episode theme music, the incredible melodic symphony to my eardrums that is Anything by Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland, and big shout out to Mad Decent Records for allowing us to use that song. As I said last week, we no longer are a sponsored podcast, so if you know of anybody who's looking to sponsor an independent, up-and-coming podcast, please tell them to reach out to me directly. You can contact me at matthew@cleanandfilthypodcast.com, and we have very affordable rates compared to other up-and-coming podcasts. So if you know of anybody who might fit that we might fit well with very nicely and cultivate a wonderful relationship, please do. And again, huge last thank you to our previous sponsor, Etc. by Emily. I really do appreciate the help. Over 30 episodes. That was amazing. Or 29 episodes. That was amazing. So thank you so much. Also have to give a huge thank you to our VIP supporters. These are the people on Patreon who are helping to support this product with donations. All of the money that goes to Patreon comes right back into this product. So if you like this product and you want it to get better, then please head over to Patreon. The easiest way to get over to that link and all of our social media links is to go to the website, www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. In the top right corner with all of our social media links, there is a Patreon link. You can click there. You can head over, develop a Patreon relationship with the Clean and Filthy podcast, and help support this podcast, and therefore help increase the overall quality of the podcast and help more people. and you get a shout out on air, like these wonderful people who are VIP supporters on the Clean and Filthy podcast, and they are Alex B, Sage A, Cindy, Stephanie, Shar, Liana, Clint, and Alex T. And if you do want to become a member of our VIP supporter group, you will get one of these amazing Clean and Filthy podcast stickers to display anywhere and everywhere that you like. Thank you all for the continued support. I highly, highly, greatly, amazingly appreciate every single one of you for helping this dream grow some legs. So I really, really appreciate that. And gotta say what's up to anybody who's on YouTube right now. For those who do not know, we broadcast live via YouTube every single Tuesday at 5 p.m. Arizona time, with episodes available for download wherever you consume your podcast. So if you're on YouTube right now, what up, y'all? Hopefully the chat gets popping. I love going back and reading the chat afterwards. So if you're on YouTube right now, get that chat popping. And of course, if you don't mind, please, if you don't mind, head over to any and all podcast directories that you consume your podcast from. Make sure to throw this podcast a download, because that is truly how we're going to be growing as those numbers go up. So thank you in advance for that. And if you're there, throw a rating, maybe. Cool. Maybe. All right. I'm not begging for ratings yet, but they are highly appreciated. And if you're not on YouTube right now with the live stream and you're listening on a podcast directory, thank you very much for checking out the Clean and Filthy podcast. Hopefully you hear something you like. And if you do, hopefully you see you again. And of course, please share it. If you want to participate in the live stream, like I said, we are live every single Tuesday, 5 p.m. Best thing to do is to head over to the website where you can be subscribed to all of our social media channels. So when we go live on YouTube, you get that little notification that says, boom, Clean and Filthy podcast is streaming live. And you come through and check us out there. So that's where to find us. But what are we? What are we? Well, again, my name is Matthew M. I am an addict in recovery, and this is the Clean and Filthy podcast. We are a weekly podcast focusing on 12-step recovery from the disease of addiction. But don't worry if you're not an addict in recovery or you aren't personally affected by the disease of addiction. Stick around and maybe you'll hear something you like, because as we talk about every single week, the beautiful thing about recovery is it's not simply about removing the drugs. It's about finding ways and means to become better human beings, to develop spirituality, to develop spiritual principles that allow us to live better lives and become better people, and hopefully help people to leave the world a better place than we found it, because that is my goal every single day. So that is what we are. But I want to make sure to emphasize that I am not speaking from a point of affiliation or authority from any one 12-step recovery fellowship. I know what works for me personally, and that is my story, but I do not want to violate any tradition. So I will not be directly speaking about my fellowship of choice, nor will I be discussing what my home group is, or what areas or fellowships I do service in, or what treatment center I went to, or anything of that sort, to make sure that I do stay in line with the traditions. But if you have any questions about treatment centers, or what fellowship might work for you, or how to get a sponsor in that fellowship, or what my home group is and want to go to a meeting or something, hit me up, because I am more than happy to discuss any and all of those topics offline. But I want to make sure that I do not violate traditions and we keep a unified perspective here. So I will not be talking about them on air. But you can always reach out to me, like I said, through Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com. That's my direct email. Or you can contact me on any and all social media. I'm on all of them constantly. So it's always nice to hear from people that are listeners and viewers. And if I can help, that makes me feel great. We talk about in the literature all the time that the best way to give it is the best way to keep it is to give it. And when I'm able to help somebody, that makes me feel amazing. So if you have any questions about things that we don't discuss on air, please reach out to me directly. I also want to emphasize that while this is a 12-step fellowship recovery-based model, this is not supposed to replace going to a meeting or calling your sponsor or doing step work or being of service or having a home group. This podcast is developed as an option and an adjunct to whatever recovery journey you're already on, and also to be a one-stop shop, if you will, for questions that you might have about recovery from the disease of addiction, what questions you might have about the 12-step recovery model, about the fellowship, about the things that us addicts in recovery go through on a daily basis. So if you have questions, please submit them. I love being able to help and share what I have gained from the 12-step recovery model. But again, this is not supposed to replace any of those other things. This is just supposed to be a great added bonus to whatever recovery journey you're on. Or if you have questions about recovery, because maybe you want to hop on that recovery freeway, let me know. Maybe I can guide you to an. Why am I back on these damn engineering metaphors? It's always bridges and freeways, and I digress. Anyway, that is what we do. That is who I am. That's what we're here for, because I just wanted this to be an opportunity to carry the message of recovery as far and as wide as I possibly can around the world, and show that, guess what? Us addicts, we do recover. And the way that this addict recovers day after day is by working the 12-step recovery model. So hopefully that clears it up. If you're an addict who's in recovery, welcome. You're exactly where you should be. If you're an addict who's not in recovery, welcome. You're exactly where you should be. If you're a person who has no direct ties to the disease of addiction, welcome. Stick around. You're exactly where you should be. Maybe you'll hear something you like. And if you do, please make sure to share it with somebody else that you feel might get some benefit out of this, because the only way that I can help people and therefore help myself is by bringing more and more people into this journey. So that's what we do. That's what we don't do. That's who I am. And that's what the Clean and Filthy podcast is. So I hope everybody is ready for a great episode. We got a lot to cover today. I'm just letting y'all know right now, we have a lot of topics to cover today, and it's gonna be a great episode. So let's get into our first segment of the week.
Let's head to the lab for some R&D. Recovery and development.
That's right, y'all. We are in the lab for some recovery and development. This is the part of the show where every week we discuss a different step or tradition or chapter out of the literature or spiritual principle from the 12-step recovery model. And we discuss the ins and outs of it. We discuss how us addicts implement these things into our lives to grow as human beings. This is the meat and of our buffet here, of our recovery buffet. Or if you're a vegan, this is like what's the best thing like for a vegan? I can't say it's a steak if you're a vegan. Ooh, I got to change my metaphors, because that could be ununifying right there. This is the yummiest, most filling part of the show. Let's put it that way. But don't worry if you are not an addict in recovery or you do not suffer from the disease of addiction. There are plenty of things within this segment that truly can be implemented into everybody's lives to help develop and grow into better people. So while this is directly out of the 12-step fellowship or the 12-step recovery model, as I always say, drugs are not the main reason that I stay in recovery, or trying to not use drugs is not the reason that I stay in recovery. The reason I'm in recovery is to grow and become a better human being. And I believe that applies to everybody, period. So that's a little intro of what we do here in the lab. So everybody, let's get goggled up. Let's get gloved up. Let's get lab coated up. Grab your micro pipettes. Let's head over to that PCR machine and let's do some analyzing of some data, y'all. So we are officially on episode 30, which I probably will say multiple times. It's just fucking crazy. Like, that's just nuts to me. Episode 30 is, I don't know why it seems so much bigger than episode 20, but it's just a huge thing. And again, thank you all for all this continued support and the continued downloads and the further evidence that this podcast is growing and working. And so thank you again for that. But I digress. So first 12 episodes of the show, we talked about the 12 steps. Next 12 episodes of the show, we talked about the 12 traditions. And then from episode 25 until now, we've been taking a different chapter out of the literature and been discussing it, been talking about quotes from it, been talking about the spiritual principles within it to give a better understanding of the literature and of the basics of recovery. Again, I will admit I probably should have done that first before I went into the steps and tradition, but we live, we learn. We are not perfect. Progress, not perfection, and I am progressing. So we were going to, if you were here last week, you know that we talked about chapter 5 out of the literature. And if you're asking what piece of literature is this directly, I do not want to identify it to make sure that I do stay in line with the traditions. I will just say that it is one of the most basic pieces of literature and the most important one in my personal recovery. So we talked about chapter 5 last week, and now we're going to be talking about chapter 7. But my loyal listeners and viewers, you might be asking, Matthew M., what happened to chapter 6? Well, chapter 6 is all about the 12 traditions. And unlike chapter 4, entitled How It Works, which has more than simply going over the steps, this chapter of chapter 6 is literally just called the 12 traditions. So I decided, since we'd already done 12 full episodes about the traditions, that we were not going to do another episode directly discussing them. If chapter 4 had simply been called the 12 steps, we probably wouldn't have done an episode on that either. I digress. So we are going to be talking about chapter number 7 today. If you want more information about chapter number 6 entitled The 12 Traditions, I highly recommend going back and listening to episodes 13 through 24, where we go in depth into every single element, or at least all of the elements to the best of my ability within the 12 traditions. So that's what I would recommend doing if you have questions about that. But now we are getting into one of the best chapters in the literature. I say that about every chapter, I know, but it's entitled Recovery and Relapse. And there's so much to cover in this chapter. It's so well written, and there's so many points in it that just vibe with me so deeply. But first, we got to talk about the spiritual principles within this chapter. And for me personally, these are the spiritual principles that directly vibe with me the most while I was reading and rereading and highlighting and re-highlighting this chapter. And they are acceptance, the spiritual principle of responsibility, of open-mindedness, willingness, empathy, powerlessness, gratitude, persistence/commitment, and honesty. So there's two main parts of that title. There's recovery and there's relapse, right? So we got to define both of them. We got to first talk about recovery because it was first in the title. So let's talk about that. So what is recovery? What is it? So it says in the literature that many people think that recovery is simply a matter of not using drugs. But we've talked about it so many times on this podcast that it is not, recovery is simply not using drugs. It's not about physical abstinence. It says in the literature that recovery, as experienced through our 12 steps, is our goal, not mere physical abstinence. Because we talked about this before. If drugs were my problem, right? If I remove the drugs, then I should be fine, right? That should be the thought process. If all I have is a problem with drugs, then you take the drugs away, I should be good. Well, as we work a 12-step program, we addicts in recovery realize that there's so much more to our disease of addiction than simply the drug use. Drug use was just a symptom. That was simply the symptom of how we dealt with life on life's terms, or feelings, or emotions, or life situations that come up. But by taking those drugs away, that is the first most important part of getting into recovery. But that's not where recovery starts or ends. Recovery is about change. And that change leads to growth, or vice versa, that the growth leads to change. So recovery is about changing our entire thought process, our entire livelihood, our entire behaviors, our actions, our feelings, our responses, our reactions. It's turning those character defects that we become so ingrained with, so meshed with, and turning them into spiritual principle alternatives. It's about finding ways to become a better human being, and in my opinion, leave the world a better place than how we found it. That, to me, is what recovery is. It says in the literature, to improve ourselves takes effort. And since there is no way in the world to graft a new idea on a closed mind, an opening must be made somehow. And that's why open-mindedness is so important within recovery. I can tell you, for me personally, if it weren't for having a tiniest shred of open-mindedness, I wouldn't be sitting here clean today with over 3.5 years in recovery. I wouldn't be sitting here carrying the message, because if I hadn't been able to have that little bit of open-mindedness and see that there was a different way to live, that there was a better way to live, that there was a new way to live, I would have never given this a chance. You know, recovery is about developing a new way of life. And because when I look at all of the things prior to recovery, none of those things worked. None of those things worked. And the symptom of my disease, my drug use, just kept growing and growing. You know, my obsession, my compulsion, my total and complete self-centeredness is what led me to getting help. And being open-minded to the program is what continues my recovery journey. And as that journey continues, I grow and I change, and then I change and I grow. And I develop new elements within myself every single day that I'm in recovery. It says in the literature, we must relearn many things that we have forgotten and develop a new approach to life if we are to survive. So I'm able to do this within myself and with others. By being in recovery, I develop self-esteem. I've developed a sense of spirituality, a relationship with a higher power. And for an addict like me, man, that was huge.
That part.
To have a concept of spirituality was huge. And that is one of the biggest tenets of recovery. We always talk about the recovery journey within the 12-step fellowship. It's not a religious one. It is a spiritual one. And because of my relationship within recovery, and because of being open-minded to recovery, that's one of the byproducts. That's grown. My sense of spirituality, my sense of connection to a higher power, all because of recovery, all the main part of recovery. And then once we start developing that self-esteem and maybe a little bit of acceptance or a little bit of confidence, then we start developing friendships within the fellowship. And the benefit of those friendships, it says in the literature, it says, now clean and in the fellowship, we need to keep ourselves surrounded by others who know us well. We need each other. Because I always say, I can't do this alone. What I can't do alone, we can do together. And that's because of this connection within the fellowship, which is brought about because of recovery. I know that no one knows me as well as another addict. This has been shown by my past history. This has been shown by my past failures in life. When I felt different or I felt like an outcast, and I can walk into a meeting and I can see that identification, say, yeah, they get me just like I get them. It says in the literature, the fellowship is a place of survival. And one of its advantages is that it places us in intimate, regular contact with the very people who can best understand and help us in our recovery. I've said so many times, reaching out to another addict, especially in times of need, is one of our greatest defenses against relapse. This chapter is called Recovery and Relapse. So we're going to talk about all of the things that we need to develop in our recovery to have additional armor, to have additional defense against relapse. Because there's so many times that maybe I couldn't get to a meeting, but I could always reach out to another addict. Whether it be directly, whether it be through the phone line, there are always resources. And having that resource within the fellowship is truly one of our greatest lines of defense. That therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. Having somebody like me who understands the things that I might be feeling or going through is where where the feeling of belonging just blossoms. The fire of belonging sparks into a large-ass forest fire, which I guess that's a better metaphor because we aren't going into like engineering bridges and freeways. So now we're going to Mother Nature. I don't know. I digress. But one of the most important things that we always talk about when it comes to recovery is the realization and the remembrance that recovery is an inside job. It says in the literature, recovery found in the fellowship must come from within, and no one stays clean for anyone but themselves. No one's going to recover for me, and I can't be recovering for anybody but myself, because if I'm doing it for somebody else, or if I'm believing that I'm doing it for this other person, or somebody's gonna recover for me, I'm cheating myself. But within that recovery journey, if I am doing it for myself, I have to remember that I'm not competing with myself, because I've been somebody from the beginning. I've been blessed that I've really wanted recovery for myself since I first got clean. When I went to treatment, maybe I didn't want recovery at that point, but I knew I needed to do something. I knew I needed to change. And then by being introduced to the fellowship, I was able to start developing that plan of attack for what I was going to change and how I was going to grow and how I was going to implement recovery within my life. But there are times that I get a little off kilter, and I start putting unrealistic expectations on myself. And I start putting unrealistic expectations on my life or my recovery. And it says in the literature that although all addicts are basically the same in kind, we do, as individuals, differ in degrees of sickness and rate of recovery. That part. And I love that quote. That rate of recovery, I love. Because I know for myself and what I've heard of other people in recovery that sometimes we get a little judgy, sometimes towards others, sometimes towards ourselves. And we see somebody else and we're like, I should be recovering better. I should be at a better level. I should be faster on my steps. I should be further along than I am because of what that person is doing. And I've done this even within myself a lot of times. But I have to remember that I'm not trying to be the fucking LeBron James of recovery. I'm simply an addict, just like tens of thousands of other addicts trying to get one more day clean, because thanks to the 12-step recovery model, I'm not trying to be the greatest. There's no such thing as the greatest. There's no MVP awards at the end of the fucking recovery season. I don't stand up there and thank my home group, my teammates, my sponsor, and hold up the MVP trophy. That isn't how this works. All I can do in my recovery is try to do a little bit better than I did the last day. That's all I need to do in terms of competing with myself. Because if I start looking at my failures, or at the times when I've made mistakes, or at the elements that I need to continue improving on, and I focus on those, and I get in a spiral of I should be doing better, all that's going to do is lead to negativity and very possibly put me on that path towards relapse. And that's a scary thing. It says in the literature that one of the biggest stumbling blocks to recovery seems to be placing unrealistic expectations on ourselves or others. And so I have to remember that I'm human. I have to remember that I will make mistakes. I have to remember I'm never going to be perfect. I have to remember that I have to step one foot in front of the other every single day, working on my recovery. Because one of the greatest things I heard early on in my recovery is that recovery is like walking up a down escalator. And I have to be progressing up and up. Slowly but surely, always progressing. And realize that escalator never stops. I'm always going to be climbing up that escalator. But if I stop walking those steps up and up and up, that recovery escalator, relapse is waiting for me down at the end. It's just waiting for me. And it's going to constantly be pulling me back towards there if I'm not diligent about my program of recovery. If I'm not diligent to every single day make an effort within my recovery. This is an effort program. This is an action program. And if I don't continue taking that action, if I don't continue progressing, that escalator's still pushing me down towards relapse. And I've seen it happen so many times over the last 3.5 years in the program. But I also have to remember that, as it says in the literature, we don't recover overnight. And we are always going to be on this journey. So I'm always going to have the opportunity to make mistakes. And people might think that's weird, like, why opportunity to make mistakes? Well, but mistakes are one of the most glaringly obvious opportunities for growth that an addict like me has in recovery. So even though those mistakes might be painful, and even though those mistakes might lead to a lot of introspection, by having that opportunity, I'm able to grow. And the only thing, I can say this, the only thing that I have done perfectly over my last 3.5 years in the program is I have not used drugs. That is the only thing. I have acted out in defect. I have made horrible decisions. I've degraded myself. I've caused pain and damage and sorrow to myself and others over this last 3.5 years. I've done things I should not have done. I've done things that I felt icky about. I've said things I shouldn't have said. I've acted in ways I shouldn't have acted. But that's okay, because I'm never going to be perfect. And the only way that it becomes a failure is if I don't learn from it. If I have an opportunity for growth and I don't take advantage of it, then that can become a mistake or a failure. But I really don't believe that even the painful things I've done, even the bad decisions I've made, I don't believe that they were mistakes as much as they were opportunities for growth. And if I believe that, if I continue processing through that, then I'm not going to feel negative towards myself. I'm not going to feel guilt and shame about the things that I've said or done, or the ways I've acted, or the defect that I've lived in, because every one of those was an opportunity for growth. Sometimes I don't even realize those opportunities for growth when they're there. It might take a little bit of time. The pain might need to get great enough. And then it's like, oh, so this is what that opportunity is for. One of my favorite quotes of this entire chapter says that we have never seen a person who lives the program relapse. And I remember hearing this early on. And I was like, yo, that sounds crazy. That sounds crazy. But I internalized it within myself and became fastidious and diligent about working the program to the best of my ability. That's why I always talk about the 5 suggestions, because the 5 suggestions were what were told to me early on that worked for other people to help them work the program and kept them clean. And we talk about these all the time. The 5 suggestions are: go to meetings, have a home group, have a sponsor, work steps, and be of service. 5 things to help make sure that I'm working the program, because as the literature says, if I am truly working the program, I'm not going to relapse. I'm not going to relapse. And this isn't just me saying this. This isn't the literature that I wrote saying this. No, this is the literature that's been passed down from thousands upon thousands of addicts with thousands of years combined of recovery that it has worked for. But as it says in the literature, we have to keep our recovery first and our priorities in order. Because anything that I put in front of my recovery, I will lose.
That part.
Period. And I might not lose it immediately. I might not have everything go away with using one time. But the life that I have built because of recovery, I know in my heart will disappear if I'm not in recovery. And because I've built this life thanks to recovery, I need to focus on my recovery to sustain it. If I go to the gym ridiculously and I look like Arnold, I don't just get to looking like Arnold and then just never go to the gym again, right? That's not how it works. We develop something and then we sustain that something. And the way that I sustain that growth and that life and those physical, mental, spiritual, emotional changes is by continuing in recovery. And it does take daily work. And it's work that I am blessed with the opportunity of being able to do. I am blessed and grateful to be able to do that work on a daily basis, to be able to make those changes on a daily basis, because then I get to see this joy and this gift of recovery continuing to work, not just in my life, but in countless other addicts' life. So that's what recovery is. But now we got to look at relapse. We got to look at the other side of it. So what is a relapse? Well, by definition, a relapse is any time that you use drugs once you were a part of the fellowship. But that also can lead, the term relapse doesn't have to be drug related. If you are a member of a fellowship for a process addiction, whether it be sex or gambling or love or overeating or any of the other fellowships that are there, it is when we participate in that activity that clearly is defined as a relapse once we are within that program. So when I look at my own personal story, I personally, as of today, just for today, relapse is not a part of my program. And I don't say that to try to sound better than somebody. I don't say that like, oh, I've never relapsed. Because I know that at any given time, if I stop my program of recovery, I know relapse is right there. But for me personally, even though there were plenty of times prior to getting into the program that I tried to stop using, I never was actually a member of the program. So there were plenty of times that I tried to stop using this substance or this substance this way that I failed. But I never was a part of the program. And now that I am a member of this 12-step recovery fellowship, from that point, I can truly say that just for today, relapse is not a part of my story. You know, relapse is not a requirement. It is a part of a lot of people's story. It happens a lot because we are addicts. And what do addicts do? Addicts use drugs. We use drugs and other things to fill that hole in our soul that we don't know how to deal with. We talked about previously on our episode about who is an addict. We talked about what us addicts do. And what do addicts do? We use drugs. It is unnatural for an addict to not use drugs. It says in the literature, because addiction is an incurable disease, addicts are subject to relapse. And this is why having that recovery base is so important.
That part.
Because as addicts, we are programmed to use substances or other external things to fill something that's inside of us. And if we are not in an active program of recovery and we aren't climbing up that down escalator, our option of relapse is going to become much closer and closer and closer. Period. It's because working a program is how we learn not to be in that natural state, not to be in that state of being loaded, being under the influence. It says in the recovery that it says in the literature that we can never fully recover, no matter how long we stay clean. That escalator is always going to be going down. And I will say that the speed of that escalator going down is a lot slower than what it was when I had 30 or 60 or 90 days, where there were times I was sprinting up that motherfucking escalator to keep ahead of that relapse down at the bottom. But I can say because of working a program diligently over the last 3.5 years, that now that escalator slowed down a little bit. And while I always still have to be taking steps up it, the speed is no longer the sprint Usain Bolt pace that it was for an amount of time there. But I always have to be taking those steps because relapse is always right around the corner. You know, and I've seen it so many times that so many addicts, one of the things you always hear is that we relapse well before we actually relapse. We relapse mentally. We revert back to thinking, to actions, to hanging out with the people we shouldn't be hanging out with, hanging out at the places maybe we shouldn't be hanging out at, living within the defects that we know where they're going to lead. But when we disconnect from our program of recovery, they become a lot more enticing. Maybe not even enticing, but they seem to be a much more clear option. It says in the literature that we revert back to our sickest behavior patterns without even having to use drugs. And so often, our behavior patterns or our thought processes lead to our actual actions. That's why having those 5 suggestions is so vital. Seeing people not going to meetings as much, seeing people not calling their sponsors, seeing people not part of the home group, seeing people not working their steps or not being an active member within service are all warning signs. It's why we say go to those meetings, have a home group. So if you don't show up at your home group for a couple weeks, people are going to be checking on you. If you start isolating a little bit, not making those phone calls, people are going to notice that. And we need those extra layers of defense from this inevitable goal that is there if we aren't diligent about our program. And seeing those things happen is a very scary thing. Going to, back before COVID, when I was going to meetings pretty much every day and seeing the same faces every day, when you don't see a face for a week or two and they don't answer that phone call when you call them, it's a scary thing. It is a very scary thing. And it says in the literature that experience shows that those who do not work our program of recovery on a daily basis may relapse. And this is especially true early on. This is why we tell newcomers, we don't tell, we suggest to newcomers, we share our experience, strength, and hope of what worked for us as a newcomer, that we go to a ton of meetings, we share about our feelings, we call our sponsor and other addicts, not just our sponsor. We need to have a wider net than just our sponsor. We do what we can to feel a part of, to be in the center of the herd, to be around others that are like us, that are doing the deal. We do step work. We be of service. We develop those habits and to carry on within our further recovery. We do those habits very, very early on. We get into going to as many meetings as possible early on. So we get into that constant habit of, I got to go to a meeting. Why? I don't know. It's just what I do. And I know that if I don't go to a meeting, I feel a little wonky donkey.
That part.
So what do? I go to a meeting. And we set all of those pieces of the foundation in place so that when life on life's terms shows up, or there's a global pandemic and I'm not physically able to go to a meeting 5 days a week, I still have my step work to fall back on. I still have my sponsor and my other recovery fellowship friends to fall back on. I still have those other elements. So if one part of my recovery foundation gets a little shaky, the other pillars can hold it up. That's why we do that. That's why we develop having that strength of the foundation. And we talk about that because that's what keeps us from the inevitable relapse. It says in the literature, we are never forced into relapse. We are given a choice. Relapse is never an accident. Relapse is a sign that we have a reservation in our program. And what is a reservation? We talk about reservations a lot, but I noticed somebody who maybe isn't familiar with the 12-step recovery program. That just sounds like, oh, you got a reservation? Yeah, we're going to the steakhouse at 7 p.m., right? Well, reservation, they are loopholes that we leave in our recovery program. They're reasons or events or feelings that we use to justify our using. The loss of a loved one, the feeling, getting divorced, getting broken up on, getting cheated on, any of those things that bring on an emotional response or some type of visceral response that we don't feel we can get through clean. And a lot of us put those into our program early on. Early on in my recovery, I had some reservations. And thankfully, by working this program and talking with my sponsor and talking with other addicts, I've gotten to the point where those reservations aren't a thing like they used to be. And when we walk through those things that we didn't think we could get through clean, those reservations, when we walk through them, it's one of the greatest feelings that we can have. It says in the literature, it says that after coming through one of these periods, we can readily agree that it is always darkest before the dawn. Shout out Batman there. Once we get through a difficult time clean, we are given a tool of recovery that we can use again and again. When I walk through a situation that I believed in my soul would lead to me relapsing and I don't use, that's a power unlike anything I can put into words. Having that tool on my tool belt, knowing that I did that because other people have done that, knowing that I did that with the assistance of my higher power, having that tool that I can then share to others, and then they can walk through using that same tool, and now they got that tool on their tool belt, that's an incredible feeling. But I got to say that even times when we can't make it through those situations clean, a relapse can finally give that gift of desperation. I've seen it multiple times where somebody leaves the program and relapses, and when they come back, they are so broken that was the catalyst to really get things on course for recovery. We talk about it all the time that there's no shame in a relapse. The only shame is in not coming back. It says in the literature, if we relapse, we may feel guilt and embarrassment. Our relapse is embarrassing, but we cannot save our face and our ass at the same time. It is better to swallow our pride than to die or to go permanently insane. And I want to acknowledge the amount of courage that is required and that is given by people walking back into a room and saying, I relapsed. I'm starting my time over. I'm a newcomer. But that courage that they carry within that and that experience, strength, and hope that they're sharing not only can inspire others, but is inspirational to me to continue on my path to not relapse. And sometimes, I've seen people that go back out of the program for one time, use one time and come immediately back into the program. I've seen people that have constantly relapsed every couple days, every week within my journey. I've seen people that relapse and never come back. They never make it back. And that, sadly, those reservations lead to a lot of people never coming back. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit, that it is a constant thing. It's always right around the corner. Death is always right around the corner. It says in the literature, a relapse, if we survive it, may provide the charge for the demolition process. A relapse and sometimes subsequent death of someone close to us can do the job of awakening us to the necessity for vigorous personal action. And I personally witnessed this. Of the relapse, seeing somebody relapse and realizing that was the final straw. That was the final thing that I can't do this anymore. That relapse or somebody dying close to them. Or them dying and having to be resuscitated, having to be Narcaned. That final demolition process of the reservations, the final demolition process of the denial. And that first step onto the journey of, wow, okay, I really need to do this. I need to take some personal action. And it's often said in recovery that recovery is the worst thing for drug use. Like if you've been in the program for a while and then you try to go use, the program has fucked up using drugs successfully, because having a body full of drugs and a mind full of program is not a good combination from what I've heard. And whatever feeling led to that relapse, whatever combinations of feelings or reservations led to the relapse, they're still going to be there when you come back to the program. When you come down off of the high, it's still going to be there. Now we just have to add the additional feelings of shame or guilt or embarrassment or whatever else. So that's the even worse element. And for me personally, the quote that I vibe with so much in here, it says, we never have to use again, no matter what or no matter how we feel. All feelings will eventually pass. And that for me, feelings aren't fact. Feelings are just feelings. And sometimes feelings can be very overpowering. Sometimes feelings can feel like they're going to crumble everything and fuck it, I'm going to use. I don't want to feel this. Well, the problem with using substances is that once that substance wears off, that feeling is still going to be there. And we still have to walk through that feeling, and we still have to process that feeling. Now we just have more feelings to process with it. It says in the literature, when we believe that drugs will solve our problems and forget what they can do to us, we are in real trouble. Because that's when we revert back to that thinking. I believe that drugs could solve all my problems prior to getting into recovery. Now that I'm in recovery, I know that that's not the case. And if I start to have that thought process again, that is a fucking scary place to be. And we aren't promised another chance at recovery, especially with the drugs that are currently around. We're going to talk about that in a little bit here. You know, we talk about in the program that our options for active addiction are jails, institutions, and death. And with the amount of substances that are being cut with very, very, very deadly chemicals out there, specifically fentanyl and carfentanil, death is always an option. It's always a possibility. And that's a scary thing. It says in the literature that relapses are often fatal. We have attended funerals of loved ones who died from relapse. And that's, I myself have, and will continue to. Death is a constant within the program, and any death is horrible. Any death is awful. But when it's an addict who's been in recovery and relapses and dies, that just really hurts me even more, because to me that death was avoidable. There were going to be deaths, auto accidents, mistakes, pandemics. There are going to be things that are just random chance. But when somebody has a solution and knows what they can do and then goes back out and dies, that hurts a little extra. You know, that hurts a little extra. And it is further evidence that I need to stay diligent about my program, because that could easily be me. You know, if you're alive today, you are a miracle. And you have the chance to change your life. If you are an addict right now who is alive today, that is a fucking miracle. Take advantage of that. Especially with how everything is right now. You don't know if you're going to have another chance. That next one might be the last one. And that sounds corny, but it's so truthful. Now they're using fucking fentanyl to cut cocaine and methamphetamines. What? That is the most antithetical thing ever, in my opinion. We'll talk about that in a second here in the next segment. But that's the reality. Anything that's on the streets right now, anything can be tainted. And that next one might be the last one. One other thing I want to talk about here. You'll hear a lot in the rooms. People will say things like, relapse isn't an option for me. And I'll admit that. When I first got clean, I would say the same thing. Man, relapse isn't an option for me. It's not an option for me. But I started to realize that no. Relapse is always an option. It's always a possibility for me or for any addict. But I remember today that I have a choice. It's no longer forced. I no longer have to use. I have a choice to use. And just for today, nothing over the last 3.5 years has that been a choice for. Thankfully. And hopefully that will continue. But I have that choice. Thankfully, by working a program, that choice is much less appealing. But it's always possibly there. I just have to do my diligence so that doesn't occur. It says in the literature, an addict who by any means can lose, even for a time, the need or desire to use, and has free choice over impulsive thinking and compulsive action, has reached a turning point that may be the decisive factor in recovery. I have that choice today. I never have to use again, even if I want to. And if I choose to, that's on me. That means I stopped working the program. That means I made a choice to no longer be in recovery. Period. And today I make the choice to continue being in recovery, to continue living the program, because that is the life that I built and that's the life I love. I'm going to close this with the quote here. It's a long quote, but I really, really like it. It says, living the program on a daily basis provides valuable experiences. If we are plagued by an obsession to use, experience has taught us to call a fellow recovering addict and get to a meeting. Using addicts are self-centered, angry, frightened, and lonely people. In recovery, we experience spiritual growth. While using, we were dishonest, self-seeking, and often institutionalized. The program allows us to become responsible, productive members of society. And the more that I become a productive, responsible member of society, the less reason I have to use, the less option or the less choice, the less likely I am to make that choice to use. And I love that. I absolutely love that. So that's what we've got for Chapter 7 on recovery and relapse. Really hope that I love that chapter. So hopefully somebody else out there really likes that chapter as well, because I think there's so much positive stuff in that chapter. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. All right. So now it is time for our next segment of the week, entitled My Favorite Moment of the Week. And no, we are not sponsored by Bang Energy yet, but we're going to do our free ad read. Because technically, every one of my favorite moments of the week is sponsored by Bang Energy, since every moment of my favorite moments of the week has been inspired, or at least has a copious amount of Bang Energy all up inside my body. And also,
phrasing.
I pushed the wrong button. So if you want some of your favorite moments of the week to be extra bangful and have 300 milligrams of caffeine, have some super creatine and ultra CoQ10 up in it, maybe even a couple EAAs to swim around inside of you, crack yourself a bang and go have some favorite moments this week, like I'm going to do. So let's get a drink of this bang. Wow, I got splashback all over my face there. My nose just got some bang in it. All right, that's not the proper way to ingest bang, for the record, just so that's known. So this is a part of the show where we talk about something that has happened over the last week that I like, favorite moment of the week. This is my part of the show. This is not full of experience, strength, and hope, though we do talk about some of that as well. But this is just my part of the show where I talk about something happy, because I like happy things. I'm a happy dude. I like happy things. And this might be something from news, pop culture, sports, Marvel, music, Instagram, possibly TikTok. Though I'm not on TikTok still, but send me those TikToks, please. I will be on Pornhub before I'm on TikTok, but send me those TikToks. This is just a part of the show where we talk about things that have happened over the last week. And it's supposed to be favorite moment, but I like too many things, so it's favorite moments. But we got to start off this episode, or this segment, with a big rest in peace shout out to one of my absolute favorite actors, Michael Kenneth Williams. Died at age 54 from a drug overdose. And this one hurt, man. Like, people die a lot, especially from the disease of addiction. But this one, like, truly one of my favorite actors. And nah, he was never a A-list actor, but he was always one of the most scene-stealing, captivating actors in history, whether it was as Omar Little on The Wire, whether it was on Boardwalk Empire, Lovecraft Country, Community, everything that he was on, he was incredible. And everybody that interacted with him talked about as an actor. Like, truly, from the first time I saw Omar Little on The Wire, first off, it was such an incredible character. I'd never seen anything like that in TV or movies, where you had a black gay dude that was a straight up gangster. Like, it wasn't playing to a homosexuality stereotype. It wasn't playing to any, he was just a character. He was just an incredible, nuanced character that, I mean, to the point that my gamer tag on Xbox Live for the longest time was Omar Little, part of the Wire clan, and my avatar had a scar up my face. It's just, it's crazy to me, man, and that one really hurts. And that one was just a constant reminder how close it always is, man. And the scariest thing, as we talked about earlier, is that it's not just opiate users who are dying. It's not just like, oh, you got some fentanyl mixed up in that heroin, or they made you a fake Oxycontin pill and it's actually fentanyl. Nah, We had 4 people overdose. 3 of them die this past weekend in California. 2 of them were moderately well-known comedians in the California scene. 3 of them died from cocaine laced with fentanyl. So somebody out there who's a coke user or a meth user or an MDMA user, like, well, I ain't got to worry about that. Guess what? Motherfuckers are putting fentanyl on everything. I don't understand why. I do not understand the logic between cutting cocaine with fentanyl. It does not make any sense to me, but it's happening. So things like this just are further reason why I'm so fucking happy that I'm in recovery and that I found recovery when I did. Because the way I was using and the substances I was using, I don't think you can get them today without them being cut with fentanyl or carfentanil or something that could probably kill me every single use. And that's a scary fucking thing. Also, we talked about last week about Kanye's Donda album. I got confirmation of the Pusha T verse. I was very angry about where's the Pusha T verse? So I did some research, heard the Pusha T verse. I didn't realize that the song on Donda, Tell the Vision, was actually just a Pop Smoke song from his album. I'm not a huge Pop Smoke fan, so I hadn't heard his album, so I hadn't heard Pusha T's verse. So now I was able to hear Pusha T's verse on that song. And now it just makes me dislike Donda even more, that the fact that Kanye literally just took Pop Smoke's verse from Pop Smoke's own album and just threw it on there like, here you go. Nah, that's fucking corny to me. Plus, I guess Pusha was supposed to be on a verse on the song Donda, but they only played it at the listening parties. So I guess I got to go watch those. Or maybe Kanye will release another version of Donda. I don't fucking know. Also, there's a really weird thing where Drake leaked a song off that was supposed to be on Donda that had Andre 3000 from Outkast and Drake on it. And and Kanye on it. And Kanye was just talking mad shit about Drake the entire time. So why Drake released a song dissing himself for Kanye, it's all weird. The whole thing was just a very odd thing. So we got to talk. We had to mention that. Also, weekly fitness update. I gained some weight. I worked out 3 times last week, and I actually am enjoying core and cardio, but I ate like shit. So that's where we are. It literally on my script here just says I ate horribly. So shrug emoji. There's a shrug emoji. Got to say something real quick that I'm really excited about. This is super recovery related, but one of the subcommittees that I am a chair for is for a regional convention in Arizona, and we were able to book this incredibly hilarious recovery comedian named Mark Lundholm. He's performed in like 50 states and 10 countries. He's been on Comedy Central, Showtime, A&E, CBS. He had a one-man show off Broadway, so I'm really excited that he's going to be the entertainment at the convention. I'm super excited about that. All right, I digress. Next, we got to talk about it. Drake's 6th album release entitled Certified Lover Boy. First off, hate the title. Second off, hate the fucking album art, bro. I'm a big fan of Damien Hirst. He's a British artist. He's the one who designed the album art for Drake's Certified Lover Boy album, which is literally 12 pregnant emojis of different outfits and skin tones. Probably the corniest album artwork I've ever seen. And this album, I'm not going to do a full breakdown like I did on Donda, but this album was so the opposite of the vibe of Donda. And I'm not comparing the two of them. I'm not trying to do that because to me, that's not, I don't know why the world wants people to do that, but that's not what I'm doing here. But with Donda, nothing really stood out. It was just a good album. With this, there were a lot of songs that I either fucking love or I fucking hate. Where with Donda, it was just like everything was like, all right, cool, whatever. But with this, I either love the songs or I fucking hate them. First off, Champagne Poetry is incredible. Top 10 Drake song ever. Love All, Fair Trade, Yeba's Heartbreak, 7 a.m. on Bridal Path, You Only Live Twice, and The Remorse. I really like all of them. But Champagne Poetry and 7 a.m. on Bridal Path are fucking incredible. And then the rest of the album teeters between not great and complete fucking trash.
Garbage. Absolute trash.
Songs like Poppy's Home, Girls Want Girls, Knife Talk, and Fucking Fans are all
Garbage. Absolute trash.
but they look like fucking legendary songs compared to the worst song I may have heard in my entire life of loving hip hop. And that is Way Too Sexy featuring Future and Young Thug, where they took the song I'm Too Sexy for My Shirt by Right Said Fred. I'm not going to continue singing that so I don't get a copyright strike, but they took that song and they remade it. And I want to know, like, who the fuck over at OVO Records thought this was a good idea? Like, where were you at, 40? Aren't you his boy? How are you saying this is something that should be done? And Future starting off his verse by saying, I'm too sexy for the syrup. I literally almost turned off the album right then. That was that. I digress, but I'm saying that was fucking trash. Absolute trash. One of the worst songs I've ever fucking heard. Maybe disliked the album even more. This would have been probably like a 6.5, 7 star rated album. Because of that song, 5.5 stars out of 10. That's what it is. I added like 4 songs to my playlist, and I can officially say I will never listen to that album again. Not once. I added 4 songs, maybe 5, that I'll listen to again. Other than that, I will never listen to Certified Lover Boy. Do better, Drake. Got to do a quick little TV roundup. It was a really cool episode of Marvel's What If. It was what if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands. And it was really cool episode. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it was super cool. There was a little line about Sorcerer Armani that was pretty sick. And then the whole timeline compressing and the interaction with the Watcher was super cool. One complaint, though, that I have is in it, the Huracan that Doctor Strange is driving, the Lamborghini Huracan, has Aventador doors. Huracan's doors open out. They do not open up. That is an Aventador or some other V12 Lamborghini. I really feel that my calling in Hollywood is to be a car and gun consultant. Because 2 of my biggest pet peeves is when the cars are wrong in movies or when gun use is wrong in movies. When they have somebody shooting a 50 caliber Desert Eagle 400 times without reloading, that makes my blood boil. I'm not a fun person to watch action movies with. I'm just letting you know, anybody out there who's like, oh, I'd like to watch movies with you. You don't want to. I'm counting bullet shots, just so you know. Archer episode 3 was really good. Loved it. What We Do in the Shadows came back, and oh my God, it was so well done. It's so well written. Also, I started watching season 3 of Master of None, and I loved that we got to learn more about Denise, and it was so incredibly well filmed. The episode was so well filmed. The spacing of the scenes was so well done, and there were lots of long takes with extended dialogue that I fucking love. That's the shit that just makes the inner cinephile critic inside of me just get all happy. It was very well done. But my actual, absolute favorite moment of the week has to do with the manly Marvel men going out for another outing. That's right. If you are watching live on YouTube, you can see the Marvel hat doing fun things with the green screen. You can see the Marvel shirt looking all marvelous. We got to talk about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, y'all. First off, movie has been doing incredibly. It already made back its $150 million budget opening weekend. And this character has been in the comic books and potentially being developed for TV and movies since the 80s. At one point, there was talk for Brandon Lee, who was Bruce Lee's son, also the star of a great movie called The Crow, being Shang-Chi. And none of it ever happened. They wrote different scripts for it. Nothing ever eventualized of it. And I'll admit, I'm not a huge fan of Shang-Chi. I don't know a ton about Shang-Chi. Even though he's been around since the 70s, I was never super into any of the Heroes for Hire storylines. I was never really into them. And even from a Ten Rings perspective, outside of the MCU interaction, I'm not talking about outside of the Iron Man interaction, I'm not talking about the MCU version of that. I'm talking about the actual comic book storyline between Iron Man and the Mandarin and that element. But I never was that into them outside of that little section. So I really didn't have that high of expectations for this movie. I really didn't. I was just like, of course I'm going to see it. It's a fucking Marvel movie. The manly Marvel men group is going to go out and watch this together. It's going to be a vibe. Cool. But goddamn, the movie was very well done. And what I liked about it probably the most is how unlike any other MCU film it was. It was this incredible marriage of a traditional shot, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Chinese style film with still standard superhero elements to it as well. Like a lot of the initial combat and a lot of the ways of how it was filmed was from a very traditional Chinese cinema style. And then they were bringing other standard superhero elements. Like there's an entire scene on a side of a building, like on these bamboo scaffolding on the side of the building that had my vertigo shook. The entire scene in the runaway bus, incredible, super elements of standard superhero fare. But then when you would have these other scenes taking place in this mythical, magical place, it was this amazing mixture that I was really impressed with, because I'm not a big fan of that traditional Chinese cinema. I did not like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. You can at me all you want, but I just never was that big into it. But with this, it was like this perfect mixture and this perfect marriage of the two. And I'll admit, part of the reason that I really never fucked with Game of Thrones is I'm not into mythical beings and dragons and fire breathing and all that shit. At me all you want. Mention how trash I am, that I have not watched Game of Thrones. That's fine. Get my mentions up. Let's go. But with this movie, there was this amazing meshing of the two to where I never felt like I had to suspend my belief too much. Even though we were living in very mystical times, even though we're having involvement with very mystical creatures, but I never felt like this, oh my God, this is fucking ridiculous. And maybe it's because I love Marvel so much. And maybe that's why when I watch Guardians of the Galaxy, I just accept the fact that there's just a race of people in the world that are fucking gold, and there's just a talking fucking little sapling that looks like a tree. Maybe that's just what I do. I don't know. But regardless, it was very well done, and I digress. I also loved the buildup. It was just so natural, like this contrasting of styles between like this dominance of his father and this desire for power, coupled with this open hand, coupled with nature, moving with the flow. Cast was so well done. It was amazingly written to where it was funny without feeling forced. The stunt work in it was incredible. And what I love is that Simu Liu is a stuntman originally. So he did a lot of his own stunts. I fucking love that. And then watching the behind the scenes of a lot of it was really, really cool. And it's funny, it had like this carryover effect because like now I'm excited about elements that I wasn't excited about before. Like in my Marvel game that I play on my phone, Marvel Strike Force, there's this whole event going on right now to get more Shang-Chi elements. And I didn't give a shit about it up until seeing the movie. And now I'm like, yo, I got to max out my character so I can get his new outfit. I need this. It's just, so shout out to the movie for now making me want to play my game more. Also, I really liked what they did in terms of having the rings be bracelets instead of on fingers. I really liked that. I thought that was a cool change from the comic book origins, and I actually really like that. And I'm really excited now to see where Phase 4 goes. You know, now we have this possible tie-in with the Eternals. And now what are they going to be bringing to the table? And what's Phase 4 going to look like? Because they're building up Shang-Chi to be majorly central to this whole Phase 4 development. If you watch the after credit scenes, it's really there's gonna be some elements to this that are gonna be pretty massive within the implications of the rest of Phase 4. Also, now that we have more dragon elements, I'm also excited to see if we can readdress Danny Rand, Iron Fist, and his whole thing, because that was really underwhelming on Netflix, and I feel like they could have done it so much better. I want to put in a spoiler alert here if you haven't seen the movie and are worried about spoilers. hold on. But the fact that they discussed and gave a pretty good ending to the whole Mandarin fiasco from Iron Man 3 was fucking amazing. I loved the cameos by Wong and Abomination, as well as the other two at the end of the movie. There are 2 mid and end credit scenes, FYI. My only complaints, I only really have 2 complaints. First one, spoiler alert again, is Death Dealer's death, the character of Death Dealer. The entire movie is made out to be this fucking badass, non-speaking mute motherfucker who will fuck your shit up, period. And his death was so underwhelming. So underwhelming. And I know sometimes movies will do that where they're like, this super badass character who just gets easily eliminated to show how bad these other bad guys are, but I was underwhelmed with that. And my other complaint, and it's a common trope within comic books and superheroes, is when a character obtains this new skill, weapon, whatever, and is immediately able to use it perfectly. Like, that to me is a little corny. Again, spoiler alert, but I mean, anybody who knows how comic book movies knows this is going to occur. But Shang-Chi, in the end, gets the 10 rings and immediately is able to use them more effectively than his father has, who's had them for thousands of years. And I get it. You can say, okay, well, he was watching his dad with them, or he's got this natural connection with the environment and the mysticism and the mystic art, so he's able to control them and do all these things. Okay, but you can't have him doing some super mega button fatality combination when you've never fucking used these things before. I don't hop onto a new video game and know the perfect combination of buttons on Mortal Kombat to have this crazy fatality the first time I pick up a game. That just doesn't happen. I mean, was he just button mashing the 10 rings until it just created this spinning cyclone of fucking dragon murder? I don't fucking know. To me, that was just a little, I don't know, that's a little corny. Overall, I really enjoyed it, and it's a totally new entry compared to the previous 24 films in the MCU. I'm very excited to see where it's gonna go. I can't wait to watch it again, and I can't wait to watch more breakdowns of the stuff. There's already a few videos I've seen that were sent to me on TikTok that really are exciting. I'm pretty excited about it. So overall, it was a solid 8 out of 10 movie. Definitely happy about it. Definitely excited to see where Phase 4 goes. And yeah, I'm definitely excited about it. So that's what we have for my favorite moment of the week. Come back next week. We're going to talk about more stuff that's happened over the last week of life. If you have anything you want to send over, any fun social media stuff, specifically TikToks, especially Marvel TikToks, send them over to your boy. Of course, you can contact me on any social media. I'm on all of them. Best place to find them is on the website, www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. And that's what we got. Now it's time for our next segment.
It's time to ask an addict with your host, Matthew M.
That's right, y'all. It is time to ask an addict. This is the part of the show where this addict, the resident addict of the Clean and Filthy podcast, answers questions submitted by our listeners and our viewers. This is like a Reddit AMA, ask me anything. I like answering questions. I like talking, and I like answering questions. So if you have any questions that you would like to have submitted to this podcast and possibly answered during this segment of the show, please send them over to Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com. They do not have to be recovery related. I like talking about everything. I like answering questions about everything. So recovery related or not, please send them over. First question. I teased that at last episode. I did a little cliffhanger to it. Says, where do I rank Kanye West's Donda album in Kanye's discography? All right, first off, this being me, I did super deep dive for this one. But I'm not going to repeat the deep dive because we don't need this to be a 5-hour episode. I'm going to do a couple qualifying things and say that this is only solo Kanye albums. This is no Watch the Throne, there's no Kids See Ghosts, and there's no Cruel Summer here. But I went back and I re-listened to everything, and I put together a breakdown of all 10 albums of Kanye. He has 10 studio releases. First and foremost, and there is no discussion about this, the number one album of Kanye's career is My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, period. If you want to fight me about it, at me on Twitter, get my mentions up. I will go blow for blow, verse for verse, beat for beat, skit for skit with you as to why that is the best album of Kanye's career, period. No discussion. Thank you. No questions. Let's go. Second, number 2 on the list, and this one is going to cause some issues. The second best Kanye album of all time is Yeezus. Period. Yeezus, the beats, the breakdowns, the angry, screamy, rageful, crazy lyrics. Some of the best beats he's ever made are on that album. I've loved that album since the first fucking time I heard it. When everybody else was saying that album's trash, fuck is wrong with you, album was incredible. Number 3 on the list, College Dropout, his debut album. I listened to it, I literally listened to it back to back. I had forgotten how much I love that fucking album. One of the greatest albums he ever made, in my opinion, number 3. Number 4 is Late Registration, his second album. Another, to me, College Dropout and Late Registration are damn near 3A and 3B. They're so close to being, depending on which one I'm listening to, I like that one more. But we're going to technically put it as number 4 here. Number 5 is Life of Pablo. And I will admit, when I first listened to Life of Pablo, I really wasn't vibing with it as much. But now that I've listened to it a lot more, it's really grown on me. Those, to me, are the top 5 Kanye albums. And they are in a class of their own. They are in it's the top 5 up here. And then the next 5 are significantly lower, in my opinion. All 5 of those albums are full playback, essentially no song skips through the entire thing. Phenomenal. Number 6 on the list, 808 and Heartbreak. 808s and Heartbreak, when it first came out, was a polarizing album, very much like Yeezus was. People either loved it or people were not fucking with it. I was actually kind of in the middle with it. I was like, all right, he's doing something very, very different than what he was doing on Graduation, but this is cool. I'm all right with it. Didn't love it. Like it a lot more now. I think it has aged incredibly well. Incredibly well. Didn't love it at first. Think it's done well. Number 7 on the list. It's an interesting one for me. And that is Graduation, which has my all-time favorite Kanye song of Can't Tell Me Nothing. Has one of my other all-time favorite Kanye songs of Flashing Lights. But there are songs on it that start to get into that certified lover boy of corny. Drunken White Girls is corny. Barry Bonds is corny. There's some corny shit on that album. So it's got to go with number 7. Number 8 on my list is Donda. I discussed why last week. There's nothing about it that super stands out. It was very meh. I mean, it's still a good album because it's still a Kanye album. And every Kanye album is still a good album. But it's not like, oh my God, it's not good enough to be better than number 8 on my list. One of our very constant listeners on this podcast, my boy Yehuda, says that in 5 years, I am going to admit that Donda was absolutely incredible and Kanye's best work. I set a reminder in my phone so that in 5 years, I will re-listen to it, and I am pretty positive that I will be sending him a text telling him that, in fact, no, he was wrong. I digress. Number 9 on the list is Ye. It was, it was a good album, but it was nothing spectacular, and it was really short. And then finally, number 10 is Jesus is Lord, which actually had 3 songs on it that I like, 2 of which I put on my playlist, and will never listen to that album ever again. So that's what I have for the top 10. Let me know what you guys think is the top 10 breakdown of Kanye West's album discography. At me directly. Send all of your hate at me. Let's go. Get my mentions up on Twitter. Talk shit on me. Flame on me for my list. Flame on me. Let's go. All right. Next question. Says, you said last week that you lived in England. Why? And what part? So yeah, when I was 15 years old, I lived in England for about 8 months. I lived in a city called Claygate. It's up in Surrey County, a little bit outside of London. I went to a American exchange high school in Cobham, which is about 45 minutes by train outside of London. really, the whole reason was so I got the high school experience. That was the high school experience my mother thought would be most acceptable for me after being homeschooled most of my life or all of my life. And then going to college, I took a break from going to college to go to high school for a semester. I mean, it was cool. I played rugby. I was an outside center / a winger. It was kind of fun. Rugby was cool. England was cool. I liked living there. It was cold. There was a lot of rain. But it was pretty much just like living in America for the most part, except it's expensive as fuck there. It is expensive as shit there because of the exchange rate of the pound sterling versus the dollar. Pretty nuts. So yeah, that's why I was in England. I loved it. I've been to England a bunch of times, traveled a ton while I was there. Got to go on a rugby trip over to Paris. That was super cool. It was a very enjoyable experience. So that's why I was in England. And last question. This is a cool question. It says, what parts of recovery are currently most challenging for me? And I had to sit down and think about it. And I'll admit that that's one of my biggest challenges is not taking the time to actually think of everything. I was talking with another addict the other day that really the only time each day that I have to not think or that my brain shuts off for a second is when I'm in the shower every night and I'm getting ready for bed. Other than that, I'm always kind of on go, whether it's with the podcast, whether it's with being of service, whether it's with helping another addict, whether it's taking care of my son, whether it's just maintaining friendships. I'm always on go. So finding balance is definitely one of the areas that that's currently most challenging for me. Also, for me, always commitment and follow through has always been one of my biggest areas of weakness. Since as long as I can remember, I would always want to do everything and would commit to most of those things up until the first challenge, and then following through was never a thing after that. Another element that's always a struggle for me is healthy sexuality and figuring out what healthy sexuality is within my journey. So that's something we're going to be talking about a lot more. I know I tease that a lot. I'm trying to do like the teaser of like the promise of sexual discussions. So stick around. We're going to talk about them. It's going to get clean and filthy. Ha ha. Hopefully that works. Another thing that's always a challenge for me is time management, man. I am the type of person who plans way too much every single day and then sometimes gets upset with myself why I couldn't take care of everything that I planned. Well, dumb motherfucker, obviously you couldn't. You didn't have enough hours in the day. So that's something that's always a struggle for me. And another one is not living in fantasy, which that ties into planning and follow through. Even directly with this podcast, the living in fantasy is like the podcast is going to blow up. I'm going to get 1 million downloads. I'm going to get super sponsored by Lamborghini, but that's not reality. I need to remain grounded and living in reality so that I can develop a plan and then follow through with that plan through commitment. So those are some things that I'm currently working on within my recovery journey. Those are my current challenges, if you will. So that was a great question. Thank you so much for that question. So that's what we have for our Ask an Addict segment. If you have any questions that you want to have answered on air, like I said, send them over to Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com or on any social media so we can get you on next week's show. All right, y'all. We are almost out of time. But we can't close up without them Clean Time shout-outs. This is the part of the show where we acknowledge various addicts for continuous times in recovery. We're celebrating all of the major milestones. We're talking about newcomers who are anybody with 29 days or less. We're talking about 30 days clean, 60 days clean, 90 days clean, 6 months clean, 9 months clean, 1 whole year clean, 18 months clean, or multiple years clean. Plus, we like to give them shout outs for big round numbers. So if you got 100 days, 1,000 days, 5,000 days, let me know so we can give you a shout out on air. Like I said, easiest way is always either Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com or on any of the social media links so we can add you to the script and we can give you a shout out. I love doing Clean Time shout outs. This is one of my favorite times of every single show or every single meeting I go to. I love getting hype for Clean Time shout outs. So let's get hype. Let's take a last little drink of this bang here and let's go. All right, y'all. First and foremost, as a newcomer, welcome back, Kayvon. Well done. Glad you're back, brother. And then next up, as a newcomer as well, we've got Kendra. Glad you are here. Keep coming. And then next up with 90 Days Clean, we got my boy Paul P. Hell yeah. And then with 18 months clean, we got my homegirl Becca. You get a boop and a half. We give out them boops for each year, so you get a boop and a half. And then next up with 2 years clean from Twitter, we got my boy Travis. Boop, boop. Hell yeah. And then next up, going out to Vegas. I'm gonna have to show my Groot doll because she loves Groot. All the way out in Vegas with 5 years clean, we got Amy Sue. Boop, 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 boop. Well done. And then finally, with 30 years clean, 33 decades clean, y'all, we got my homegirl Salida. Boop, 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 boop. Oh, I gotta reload. Let this go. Bop, 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 bop. Yeah. We'll let Kendra finish there. There we go. 30 years clean, y'all. And you know how she did it? Just for today. One after the next. Let's go. I'm hyped now. I love it, love it, love it. Congratulations, everybody and anybody who celebrated Clean Time today. If you didn't, guess what? Don't use and you will. That's literally how this program works. Remember that every single day clean is a successful day.
That part.
So if you are celebrating any clean time between now and next week's episode, which is Tuesday at 5 p.m., make sure to send it over to me anywhere that you would like on social media. Make sure to include your first name, your last initial, and how much time clean you are celebrating. And we will give you a shout out on air, and we will get super fucking hype. Love that shit. All right, y'all. Well, we are officially out of time. But I just wanted to give a special thank you again to every single person who's out there helping support this podcast every single week. I appreciate all of your time, your effort, your energy that you're putting in to help this product, to help critique, give notes, support. I really appreciate it. And as I always say, I couldn't have done it without every one of y'all. So if nobody's told you today that they love you, I love each and every one of you. And I thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your journey and you a part of mine. Again, we don't have any sponsors, but thank you to whoever is going to eventually sponsor it. Huge thank you again to our VIP supporters. Huge thank you for this gorgeous song in my ears, Anything by Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland, Mad Decent Records. Please make sure to download wherever you consume your podcast from. We're listed on all of them. Check us out on YouTube. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to all social medias. And I will see each and every one of you next week, 5 p.m. Arizona time. Love y'all. Let's go.